And now, next point of our agenda, we're happy to have the opportunity to have the OECD helping us, especially on the Nordic results. And the OECD has both expertise on the PISA matters as well as the outsider's view, which is very good when we're talking about the Nordic countries' performances. As you have, the OECD has, they know about our performances historically and also today when it comes to the results. And we will begin with a short video from Andreas Schleicher, who's the director for the Directorate of Education and Skills at the OECD. And after him, after the 8 minutes video, we will have Miyako Ikeda telling us much more of this.
Hello, and my congratulations for putting this seminar together. It's so important for the Nordic countries to come to grips with the results from PISA. With the exception of perhaps Estonia, the Nordic countries have all seen a somewhat downward trend when it comes to academic performance. Now, Finland dropped by 60 score points since 2003. That's the equivalent of 3 school years. You might think that's all because of the pandemic, but that's just part of the picture. And for most countries in the region, the decline in student performance is set on well before the pandemic. But you know, when you look at the results in a little bit more detail, the big picture becomes much more nuanced and in some ways positive for the Nordic countries. Students in Finland are no longer among the world's academic top performers, but they show a high level of emotional resilience and a good level of learner agency, and also of psychological well-being in PISA, and an exceptional high level of openness to divergent perspectives and viewpoints. The academic results for Norway are disappointing too, but Norwegian students show a very high level of student agency, the capacity of students to mobilize their cognitive, social, and emotional resources to do things, which is so important these days as well. In contrast, a comparatively low level of agency and a relatively low quality of social relationships puts a grain of salt on the stellar academic results of Estonia. And that's why it's so important to see the results in the bigger picture. Positive features that the Nordic countries have in common is comparatively little variation in school performance. Now, often the closest school is also the best school. We also see just a modest relationship between social background and student performance. Although, you know, students with an immigrant background fare generally poorly in the Nordic countries, even after discounting for the influence of social background. And that's quite in contrast to countries, you know, like the United Kingdom, where they actually do better than native students net of social background. So what can we do to improve results? Well, there's a temptation to think this is all about money, no? But while money matters a lot for countries that invest little in education, for most OECD countries, and including the Nordic countries, the relationship between spending per student and learning outcomes is rather tenuous. Top performer Singapore spends far less or similar to Qatar, but actually does much better. And high performer Vietnam spends the same as the Philippines, but does far better. And with the exception of Estonia, the Nordic countries could certainly do better with the money they spent according to PISA. And sometimes that comes to difficult spending choices. But one thing is certain, if you have to make a choice between a smaller class and a better teacher, always go for the better teacher. And some of the Nordic countries like Sweden clearly face difficulties in attracting qualified teachers according to PISA. But then you find countries like Denmark where PISA suggests, you know, teacher shortage is much less of an issue. And PISA shows quite clearly that a shortage of staff can matter. Mathematics performance is considerably lower in countries in which principals reported a lack of teaching staff or inadequacy or poorly qualified teaching staff. And the same also holds for a shortage of assisting staff or education material or the lack or inadequacy of digital resources. Actually, there's an interesting story to tell for the Nordic countries when it comes to the use of digital resources. And most of them, particularly in Sweden and Norway and Finland, students spend a large share of their school days on devices, while in Estonia, that's less the case. And the question is, of course, whether spending time online is a good thing or a bad thing. And the answer seems to differ depending on how technology is used. Now, when technology is used for learning, the relationship between the hours of technology use and math performance seems largely flat. Some teachers do a great job with technology, and others perhaps less so. But when technology is used for leisure, you can see a consistent and steeply declining learning outcomes. How can that be? Well, a significant minority of students say they get distracted by their digital devices. And in many cases, they get distracted by other students using their devices, according to PISA. In most countries, the majority of students also feel somewhat anxious when they don't have their digital devices near them. You can see some kind of dependency or addiction. And what the data show is that students who feel anxious when they don't have their smartphone with them do a lot less well in mathematics. And that's not all. They are also less satisfied with their lives. They have harder times managing themselves, and they are less resistant to stress, according to PISA. All in all, when students use their smartphone at school in most mathematics lessons, they were 1.4 times as likely to be distracted than students who did not. So, what can you do about this? Well, we didn't find much of a difference in students being distracted when schools had some written policy or when teachers established rules for the use of smartphones during lessons and so on. The only thing that is clearly linked to less distractions was a ban of smartphones at school, as indicated, by PISA. But if you, of course, go down that road, then, how are you going to prepare students for the digital world? So these are really difficult questions. But let's get back to teachers. During the pandemic, it became abundantly clear that learning is not some transactional business, but always a relational process. So we asked students about their experiences during the pandemic. In Vietnam, almost 9 out of 10 students said their teachers were available when they needed help, and just 30% said they felt lonely. None of the Nordic countries get anywhere close to that. And in fact, in Iceland, teacher support seems quite low, according to PISA. A good third of students report that they didn't get help from their teachers when they needed it. And, where students felt their teachers were available, they also scored roughly a school year better. So that teacher support really matters. We asked students how they were supported during the pandemic. And what you can see is that on average across countries, half of students were offered live virtual classes, got material on a learning platform, got assignments. What is more troubling is that just 13% of students had someone to check in with them every day, how they were feeling. How are you? It's not a really difficult question to ask, but that aspect of student well-being seem not to get the attention it deserves. Well, there are lots of more interesting findings in PISA, and I'm sure you will have an interesting discussion here at the Nordic seminar. Thanks again for inviting me.
Thank you very much, Andreas Schleicher, putting 492 pages in an 8-minute video. That's fantastic. And now we have Miyako Ikeda here, senior analyst. You have been working at the OECD for 20 years, as I understand, and you lead and manage the analytical aspects of PISA. We're so happy to have you here. Come on to stage. Give her a warm applause. And I will give you this. And it's just... Miyako, could you please turn on your microphone? We think it's not on. And just as you said, I will probably interrupt Miyako a few times because I'm sure there are plenty of things that we want to ask her about.
Right. So PISA usually happen, is okay? So PISA usually happen every 3 years. The first one was conducted in 2000, and this is the 8th assessment. And this was originally planned in 2021, but pandemic happened, and the PISA 2021 was postponed by 1 year. So now we call this 8th round of PISA as a 2022. So PISA measures the extent to which students have acquired key knowledge and skills which are essential for full participation in social and economic life. So in addition to the test, students and school principal are asked to respond to questionnaires to collect contextual information such as family background, their attitude towards learning, learning environment, and resources. And also, there are optional questionnaires for teachers and parents. And about 20 countries took this teachers and parents optional questionnaires. The focus of PISA 2022 was on mathematics, while reading and science were also measured. And in addition to the 3 core domains, creative thinking was assessed as an innovative domain, and financial literacy was offered as an international option. So PISA assessment do not just measure whether students near the end of their compulsory education can reproduce what they have learned, but PISA assessment also examine how well students can extrapolate from what they have learned and apply their knowledge in unfamiliar settings, both in and out of school. Since PISA is not a traditional test of math knowledge, I'll briefly explain what students were expected to do. In PISA, students have to demonstrate more than to remember mathematical concepts or routines. They have to show that they could think like a mathematicians. What does it mean, think like mathematicians? This means that, so looking at the problem from the real world and translate it into the world of mathematics. This is the first part in red, formulate. And then once you tease out the mathematical component from real life problem, you have to apply the mathematical concepts or routine. So this is the second part in yellow, employ. And the last process is once you get the mathematical solution, you have to bring it back to the real life context. So you have to evaluate and interpret in the critical mindset. So in addition to these 3 processes, this 3 process has been in PISA since 2003, but in 2022, we introduced a new aspect, which is called mathematical reasoning. So mathematical reasoning is the underlying competency for formulate, employ, and interpret and evaluate. So this is like thinking like a mathematicians. And then also in addition to that, students have to be able to be aware and can tell that process, mathematical process, they are applying. So the clear recognition of what they are doing. So it's like a metacognitive level of the competencies. And as usual, PISA's questions are given to various contexts, and then we value the 21st century skills like critical thinking and so on. So in PISA 2022, around 690,000 15-year-old students in 81 countries and economy participated. Why does PISA focus on 15-year-old? This is because in many countries, it is around the age that students are finishing compulsory education. So in last December, 2 volumes on the initial result of PISA 2022 were released. The first volume, Volume 1, looked at how students performed in mathematics, reading, and science before and after the pandemic, and how those results differ by student socioeconomic status, gender, and immigrant backgrounds. In other words, the Volume 1 covers performance and equity. And the second volume, Volume 2, examined which are the resilient education systems that promoted student learning, equity, as well as student well-being despite the pandemic. Let's look at the latest results. On average across OECD countries, performance in all 3 subjects declined since PISA began. Between 2018 and 2022, mathematics and reading scores declined by significant amount, while science score did not decline significantly. Mathematics performance dropped by 15 score points between 2018 and 2020 on average across OECD countries. This drop is substantial considering that previous changes in OECD average never exceeded 4 score points in mathematics. Next, we will look at the result of individual education system. When the recent performance change between 2018 and 2022 are examined, it is important to interpret them in the context of pre-2018 performance trend as well. So here is the performance trends in mathematics, reading, and science for Finland. In all 3 subjects, average performance in 2022 was lower than in any previous assessments. This steep decline in mean score between 2018 and 2022 confirmed a decline that began much earlier than the pandemic. Over the 2012 and 2020, 2012 in the middle here, to 2022 period, student performance declined by more than 20 score points on average in all 3 subjects. So in PISA's context, we say that 20 score points is typically a gain that students make around the age of 15 over an entire school year. So you can translate this big drop into an equivalent school year loss. And for Iceland, in all 3 subjects, average performance was lower in 2022 than in any previous assessments. And while the performance was already declining prior to 2018, the steep drop in mean score between 2018 and 2022 marked a significant acceleration of the decline. So both Finland and Iceland showing a declining trend since the PISA start. When it comes to Denmark, it's a little bit more complicated. So when we look at the short term, average 2022 results were down compared to 2018 in mathematics and reading. But in science, 2018 and 2022 results are about the same. And in terms of the long-term trends in mathematics, average performance was lower in 2022 than in any other previous assessment. The recovery reported in 2015 and 2018 turned out to be the fragile one and was erased by the more recent drop. And the overall trend, including 2022, is declining. On the other hand, in reading and science, the overall trend in these 2 subjects are more flat. So this is a trend for Norway. So 22 results were lower compared to 2018 in math, reading, and science, all three subjects. And long-term trends, average performance were lower in 2022 than any previous assessment in mathematics, and close only to the performance observed in 2006 in reading and science. So while in reading and science, a significant drop was already observed between 2015 and 2018, in mathematics, results had not shown sign of deterioration prior to 2018. Here's Sweden's result. So 22 result, when we look at the short-term trends, 22 results were lower compared with 2018 in mathematics and reading, and about the same between 2022 and 2018 in science. In terms of long-term trend in mathematics reading, the drop in average score between 2018 and 2022 reversed most of the gains observed between 2012 and 2018, and results turned close to those observed in 2012. And in science, the trend remained somewhat more positive over the 2012 and 2022 period. And last, so this is the trends for Estonia. So in mathematics and reading, 2022 results were lower than 2018. But in science, 2022 and 2018 results are almost the same. In terms of long-term trends, when considering all PISA assessments in which Estonia took part, in all three subjects, the result described an arc shape, which is the initial increase followed by a decrease in performance. So here is all 81 countries and economies participated, all the countries that participate both 2018 and 2022, and how mathematics performance changed. And diamonds show the change between 2018 and 2022, which is a short-term trend. And the bar shows the long-term trend or pre-2018 trends. So we would like to contrast the most recent trend in the context of the pre-pandemic trend. And then all the symbols in the darker tone are significant change, and the symbols which are lighter tone, lighter color, are non-significant change. So you can see that in Sweden, Denmark, and Norway, Sweden, Denmark, and Norway in the middle, the 2018 and 22 trends showed negative trends, but the pre-2018 trends showed stable trends. In Estonia here, the 2018-22 trends showed somewhat negative trends, but the pre-2018 trends were positive, so that the recent trends reversed compared with the pre-2018 trends. And Finland and Iceland towards left. So these are the countries, the 2018-2022 trends were negative, but also the pre-2018 trends are negative already. So these results tell us that the pandemic is an obvious factor that likely impacted student performance decline. However, it is not just due to the COVID. Some long-term issues in the education system are also related to the drop in performance in many of the systems. So here is the PISA's result in mathematics by proficiency level. In PISA, we categorize a student from level 1 to level 6 being the highest competencies, and then set the level 2 is the minimum or baseline level proficiency that students need to acquire in order to participate fully in the society. And level 2 is also used as a benchmarking level for the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal 4.1.1. So on average across OECD, around 70% of students attain at least level 2 in mathematics. And over 80% of students reach level 2 in 9 school systems, including Estonia. On the other hand, towards left, less than half of students reach level 2 in 35 education systems.
May I interrupt? I have a question.
Yes.
It's especially on the proficiency levels. And you say proficiency level 2 is important in order to engage in the society. What do the pupils risk if they don't come up to that level? Or why is it so important to have all the pupils up to proficiency level 2?
Thank you for the question. So at this level, level 2, students begin to demonstrate the ability and initiative to use mathematics in simple real-life situations. And at this level, students can use their mathematics ability even if it's not clearly mentioned in the test form. So they can infer, they can extrapolate so that this implication is happening from the level 2. So before level 2, all the answers are quite visible, clearly mentioned in the test form. So that's the big difference. So I would like to give some example of the level 2 item. So here is the test item the student actually took in year 2022. And this is the level 2 mathematics item. And students were asked to compute the percentage of blue triangles when the fifth row is added. So here in this question is given up to fourth row. But now, when the fifth row is added, what is the percentage of the blue triangle? So this is the point that I just said, level 2 item, there's no really answer is given in the test question itself, but students have to think one step. So is the answer is hidden in the question. So since fifth row is not shown here, students have to extend the pattern they understand from here to one more row. That's the important part for level 2. And the answer is 40% with fifth rows. So 10 blue triangles divided by 25 total triangle and 40%. So this item is intended to be easy and to get students thinking about the pattern beyond what is shown in the question. This requires generalization of the model. So this is the level at which the PISA expects the 15-year-old student to achieve at minimum. And this item is also categorized at the first part, formulate. So that from the question, they have to tease out what is the mathematics component of the problems. Just to contrast, I would like to give the other end, the higher end of the item. So it's the same unit, but the very end of the same unit, there's a question a little bit more difficult. So this is the final item in the same unit to evaluate a claim that the percentage of blue triangles in the pattern will always be less than 50% as more rows are added. And the students are asked if this statement is correct or not, yes or no. Then in the square here, students have to write why they say yes or why they say no. So they have to support their, they have to give the evidence or reasoning behind their answer. So this item is level 4 or level 5 towards the very high end of the PISA proficiency level. And those students who say yes, but a half correct answer, like because the first row has only a red triangle, this kind of answer will get the partial credit. And this student will get level 4. And then the full credit is given to the student who say yes, click yes, and then give the answer. There will always be one less blue triangle in each row. So that kind of answer will get the full credit. And then this is the item of mathematics reasoning. So students have to answer the question and then provide the reasoning behind why they think this is yes or no. So for PISA, the country get the overall mathematics scores. But in addition to overall mathematics score, country also get the more specific score for different steps or processes of mathematics. So country get 4 additional scores, scores for formulating, scores for employing, interpreting, and reasoning. And when we look at the Nordic countries and Estonia, it's a quite interesting pattern come out. Relatively, the students in Nordic country, they are weak in formulating the first part. On the other hand, most of the countries, especially in Denmark and Sweden and Norway, students are relatively strong in reasoning. So hope this information will help the curriculum developer or teacher training unit within the ministry to think about why is it, and then what component make the students in Nordic country weaker in the formulating. On the other hand, good news is the students tend to be strong in mathematical reasoning. Now, let's look at the variation in student performance within each education system. So Andreas mentioned that in the video, the Nordic country achieved the smallest between school variation. So you can see that all these Nordic countries have much smaller variation in student performance between schools. So this means that schools' performance are not really different. And Estonia, Iceland, Finland, and Denmark all succeeded in minimize the difference of the performance between schools. So this means that from parents' point of view, whichever school you send your kids, similar level of education is assured. On the other hand, towards right, the Netherlands has such a big difference according to the school. So depending on which school your kids attend, that is directly linked to the level of proficiency in mathematics the student can gain. And mostly because that towards the right, the countries, they are applying the more selective education system. So they screen the student in early age and then give a very different curriculum for different tracks. Now, when we look into the within school performance, there is some variation across Nordic countries. So Iceland, Finland, Norway, and Sweden, highlighted in yellow, these countries tend to have a quite big variation in school, within school student variation. So there is not much difference between school in terms of performance, but when you go into the school, you see a high performer and low performer, and that difference is quite big in this country. On the other hand, in Denmark and Estonia, they managed to keep the high performer and low performer gap relatively small around the OECD average, which is shown with the purple line. So this has a important information for where to target the policies. So apparently that in Nordic countries, targeting the poor performing school may not be working because all school performing similarly well or similarly low. But it's important to target within school because there are low performers in each school or many schools in many neighborhoods. And also Andreas talked about the relationship, the performance, and then how much money put into. So often that we get the question that our student performance is so different across the countries, and then there's a temptation to think that this is very much to do with the money, how much money invested in education. So PISA result continuously showing this kind of fear we've been showing almost in the last 10 years, that there is relationship between the money investment in education and student performance, but only to the certain point. You can see that towards left, all this light blue diamond, these are the countries that didn't invest in education much. This is less than 75,000 US dollar in one student per student from age 6 to 15, the cumulative expenditure. And there is a quite strong correlation between the money invested in education and performance. But once it goes beyond 75,000, you see that the correlation is almost flat. And so this implies that, okay, it's important to invest enough resources in education. But beyond that, it's also important to think about how to allocate money, how to allocate the resources where most needed.
May I interrupt you again? Because this is interesting, as we all the Nordic countries are after this point. Do you mean that it's no use in putting more money into our schools? It's more about how we organize it, and do we know how we should do it in a way?
So this picture is a snapshot of one point. So we are not really showing the increase of the investment in education in Sweden. Does it resulted in the performance increase or not? So we really cannot draw the causal relationship. Based on this, we do not say that investing money is useless. We are not saying that. But it's more saying that, let's say that Finland, Denmark, and Sweden, so they are now investing about 130,000. And then if you increase it to over 140, here, this line, 140,000. And then there's a possibility that these countries, Finland, Denmark, Sweden, may perform as high as Korea, may perform as low as United States. But education system is so different. How they allocate the money within the education system is so different in Korea, United States, and Finland, Denmark, Sweden. And also the social and cultural contexts are so different. So you really cannot interpret immediately that once you invest more, over 140, Nordic country becomes like Korea or United States. But just show that what if you are thinking about increasing, or you can, if it's affordable to do the increase of the budget, it's important to look at other countries and see that what Korea is doing, what United States are doing, and learning from them. And then some of the things you cannot really import because social and cultural background is very different. But some aspects, like how to allocate the resources within the education system, can be something that you can learn from other systems. So it's important that just before rushing into the increasing the education budget, also at the same time think about how to allocate it and how the other countries are organizing or spending the amount of money in education.
Thank you.
And next question we often get is is low performance all about the reflection of a student's disadvantaged background? So we grouped the student in 81 countries and economy in 10 groups, and then identified advantaged students and disadvantaged students based on the socioeconomic background. And triangles are the advantaged students that they are equally advantaged across countries. And then students shown with the square are the students who are disadvantaged background equally across all countries. So interesting point is that you can see that disadvantaged student in Singapore is perform as high as advantaged student in Norway, Iceland, and Iceland. Also, when we look at Switzerland, Switzerland, the disadvantaged student in Switzerland, they are performing almost the same as the average student in Sweden. So this shows that the poverty is not a destiny. Just because your background is not disadvantaged, it does not determine the performance. The performance levels really varies across education system. But again, school system play crucial role for this, that whether the disadvantaged student, even the disadvantaged student can perform high or not. But again, we need to really think about the social and the culture context surrounding the education as well. Because the more and more we see the trend that students are less committed to the education. And we ask a student at the end of the test that how much effort did you put on in the PISA test? And then we ask a student to scale from 0 to 10. 10 is the highest effort. And then next question is, if this is the high stake test, did you put, how much effort did you put in this kind of test? And 0 and 10. We saw some decline in the Nordic countries for the effort put into the PISA test. But what is more worrisome is, even for the second question, that if this is a high stake test, how much effort you put in, that also went down. So it means that student motivation to put effort in education seems to be declining. Further analysis is needed, but this is something, the alarming sign that school can do certain things, but surrounding that social view on education or schooling may be changing over time. So in addition to math and reading and science, PISA also emphasizes on equity and student well-being. So I would like to introduce that quickly. And in volume 2 of international report, we defined a resilient education system based on performance and equity and well-being. So let's talk about the equity, because we talk a lot about the performance already. In those country education system on the right top, those are the ones that achieved both high performance, which is the vertical line, and then also the equity, which is the horizontal line. And you can see that the Denmark and the Finland are two of those systems performed high performance as well as equity. And the Sweden, Estonia, Norway, and Iceland is just of these 10 countries, but it's almost the same as OECD average level. And for those systems on the top left, it's important to reduce socioeconomic gap in performance while keeping overall strong performance. And for those on the bottom left, it's important to raise all student performance with reducing socioeconomic gap in performance. And those on the bottom right quadrant raise all student performance without widening socioeconomic gap in performance. And despite general concern about disadvantaged students being more affected by the pandemic, in a large majority of systems, about 45 out of 63, performance gap between advantaged and disadvantaged students did not change between 2018 and 2022, including Denmark, Iceland, and Norway. However, in Estonia, Finland, and Sweden, socioeconomic gap in performance widened because disadvantaged students showed sharper or steeper decline than advantaged students over the 4 years. Now move on to the third aspect, the student well-being. We use students' sense of belonging at school as the major indicator for student well-being in our report. So compared to 2018, students' sense of belonging at school remained stable or improved in 2/3 of education system, and only in 1/3 of system, it declined from 2018 and 2022. In Estonia, here, there was no change in sense of belonging between 2018 and 2022, and students' sense of belonging is below the OECD average in 2022. So among Nordic countries, Denmark and Norway showed decline in student sense of belonging over that 4 years. And Finland, Iceland, and Sweden showed improvement in student sense of belonging between 2018 and 2022. So despite this difference in trend among the Nordic country, what we can say here is that Nordic country in student sense of belonging in general relatively higher than the OECD average. So this is a point that Andreas was not pointing out in his message that Nordic countries succeeded in ensuring the social, positive social relationship at school. So now we consider all three aspects, learning, performance, and equity, and then well-being all together. We identify which systems are resilient. And then it turned out that Japan, Korea, Lithuania, and Chinese Taipei showed resilience in all three aspects. And next question we had is, what are the common characteristics of these resilient systems? What are they doing? So in like 300 pages of report in volume 2, we looked at these 5 aspects. Now I have only 10 minutes, so I would like to focus only a part of that, but please access to the last chapter of volume 1 or volume 2, both are the same chapter, talking about the 10 actions related to the resilience. So we identify these 10 actions which seems to be related to the resilience of the education system. And today I would like to focus on, one is now digital distraction, and then other part is focusing on teachers. So for the first time in PISA, we asked the student that how often students are distracted by the use of digital devices in classroom. On average, 30% of students reported that they are distracted by the use of digital devices, such as smartphone, during most or almost all mathematical lessons. And 25% reported they are distracted by other students using digital devices during lessons. And as expected, students who got distracted performed 15 points lower than those who did not get distracted. So even after accounting for student socioeconomic background. All Nordic countries show above average level of distraction by using digital devices, you can see towards left. On the other hand, Estonia is below OECD average level of distraction. And then in Finland, especially, the over 40% of students reported digital distraction during lessons. So digital device also have some consequence for student well-being, as Andreas pointed out in his video. On average, around half of students reported that they feel nervous or anxious without their phone. And then this proportion is quite high for Finland.
I'm sorry, can I interrupt you again? Because this is interesting. So pupils get distracted for having the phone or someone else having the phone. But then some pupils, maybe the same, we don't know, are distracted or anxious because they don't have the phone. How to overcome that kind of problem? Because either they don't have the phone and they feel disrupted, or they have the phone.
Yeah, combine these two information so we can picture that students who are so nervous without phone, so bringing the phone into class, instead of turning off the notification of SNS, keep looking at the phone during a lesson. And then they are distracted by the use of that, or they are distracting other students. So what can we do? So I think it's that the next slide show the student who get nervous if phone is not nearby, they don't have a good well-being. So we cannot leave them like that. We cannot leave them using the phone in the classroom just because they feel nervous. So that's the part that we have to work on. It's kind of the addiction now, so that we saw that this is a relationship between the student who get nervous without phone nearby, and then life satisfaction. So it's negative, meaning that those kids feel not so satisfied with their life. So we have to do something for these kids. We shouldn't really let them keep using the phone in the classroom just because they feel nervous. And then, of course, with the mathematics performance lower. And then we saw that negative correlation with the students who get anxious without phone, and emotional control is lower, and stress resistance is lower. So that this may be, so again, the PISA is not a causal, cannot tell a causal relationship, but there's some relationship between the students' socio-emotional characteristics and then nervousness without phone. So we may be able to work on this emotional control and stress resistance if we can teach students how to manage the stress, how to control emotion. It might lead to the reduction of the anxiousness of the phone, without phone. So as Andreas said in his video, that in Nordic country, the use of the digital device is quite long in the classroom, in the school. But and then I just showed that digital distraction is big. But digital device is not necessarily a sign of poor performance. When we just look at how long students use, how many hours students use digital device for learning, which is more structured or controlled, we don't see the negative relationship up until 5 hours. But when we just focus on the student use of digital devices for the purpose of leisure, which tend to be less structured or less controlled, we see a negative correlation after 1 hour. So up until 1 hour, there's really no negative relationship. So this graph implies that high-performing students seem to know when to stop using devices, and they have self-control over the use of digital devices, especially when you are free to use for leisure purpose. So what can we do, and what schools and teachers can do to ensure that digital devices do not distract student learning? So many schools have already introduced guidelines addressing the problem of distraction. And right-hand side of the graph, this is the policies that we collect the data through PISA. And among these policies that we analyzed, cell phone bans turned out to be the only one, those in the red, one in the red, the only one related to the reduction of digital distraction. Other policies that we asked in the PISA questionnaire didn't turn out to be related to the reduction of the cell phone ban. But at the same time, further analysis showed that cell phone bans may have some downsides as well. For example, the student in school with cell phone ban may not have adequate opportunity to develop self-directed strategy for using cell phone. We ask the students that, do you turn off the notification of SNS before going to sleep? And then we compare the proportion of students who turn off the SNS notification before going to sleep between the student in the school where the phone are banned and the school the phone are not banned. And we saw in some countries that there are a big difference, and students in school phone are banned. They tend to leave the SNS notification overnight. So and our interpretation is, it seems that they haven't had a chance to develop their own strategy to use the cell phone. So this area that we still need a further research and analysis. But what is most important is that we need to come up with a policy which limit the distraction while help students develop agency in using digital devices. The next topic is teacher support. So teachers play a crucial role in education, and they're very much related to student learning. However, in many school systems, teacher support declined over the last 10 years. And you can see that except for Sweden, Nordic countries show a decline in the teacher support. And this figure shows the education system, which showed a decrease in teacher support between 2012 and 2022, also tend to show a decrease in performance during the same period. So this area, again, that further research is needed to better understand why teacher support declined. But we could think that maybe this is something to do with some system level issues such as teacher shortage. So we look into the teacher shortage, whether those are increased or not over time.
Could I ask you though, could it also be that children need more support? So it's not about teacher shortage, it's more children need more support. I don't know. What is your analysis?
Yes. Unfortunately, we really didn't have a data that the amount of students who need support. But yes, I think that's a really good point that overall, especially after the pandemic, the proportion of students who need teacher support may increase. And that is one of the potential hypotheses behind this as well. So we looked into the teacher shortage, and the school principals in 2022 reported more of the teacher shortage than 2018 in many education systems, including all Nordic countries except Sweden. And in contrast, principal in 2022 reported less of the material shortage than 2018 in all Nordic countries except Norway. So the round circle are the change of the principal's response in terms of shortage of teaching staff. And triangle is school principal's report or perception of the educational material shortage, how it changed over time. And you can see that the triangle tend to be below the level 0, meaning that material resource shortage tend to be reduced over the last 4 years. On the other hand, circle tend to be above 0, meaning that principal's perception of teacher shortage increased over the 4 years. And we looked into the student-teacher ratio to see that if the student-teacher ratio is driving the principal's perception of increasing teacher shortage, and we didn't find that much change of student-teacher ratio. So there's something else. So it's not, this result is not merely the reflection of, oh, we don't have enough teacher per student, but something more than that. And then we developed now various hypotheses, and one of the hypotheses could be the one that Eva just said, that maybe after the pandemic, more students need help. Or often that teacher absenteeism is not reflected in the student-teacher ratio because teacher absenteeism is not part of this indicator. Or teacher quality may have changed, or expectation towards teacher may have changed after the pandemic. We hear all this anecdotal story that now teachers have to play the role of psychological counselor or social worker or entertainer so the students come to school and never get bored. So there might be something going on, the expectation towards the teacher and the role of teacher. And again, that as expected in most education systems, students score higher in mathematics when they perceive their teachers to be more supportive. And interestingly, this teacher support is also positively correlated or correlated with the less anxiety. Those students who said that teachers support them, they report less anxiety towards mathematics. I will skip this one. So talking about anxiety, so we found that what is really related anxiety, one is a teacher support, and the other is the growth mindset. Students who reported having a growth mindset have less mathematical anxiety than students with a fixed mindset, on average across OECD countries. And even at the country level, you see that those countries where more students have growth mindset, they tend to perform higher. So in Estonia, students see, Estonia is a very high. So 75% of students disagree or strongly disagree that their intelligence cannot change very much. So they believe that by making effort, they can change their results. So in Estonia and many of the Nordic countries, students see the sky as a limit to their performance. They trust when they work hard. They believe that if they work hard, they can achieve higher. And what is most important is we shouldn't leave the student alone for this. It's not only just the student effort, but surrounding is even more important. Teachers and parents, they have to believe in the growth of the individual student or children, and they help them to achieve higher. So if some student stuck for one task, instead of giving the same instruction again and again and again, the teacher have to think about other way to approach to that issue to help the student to understand the issue that student cannot solve. So the more individualized and more support to the students, and also parents also plays an important role to transmit the value of the growth mindset, the belief in your own skill and effort. So that is often happening also at home as well as in school. So this is the end of the volume 1 and 2 presentation, but I would like to share one additional slide as the focus is the STEM. So we found something quite interesting but alarming result related to STEM. So in student questionnaire, we asked the student at the age of 30, what kind of occupation do you want to engage in? This is the occupational aspiration. And we especially look into the ICT area, ICT-related occupation, and also health-related occupation. So this is the graph showing the difference in the student interest in ICT profession and also in health profession between 2018 and 2022. So ICT profession is shown with diamond, and the health profession is shown with circle. If this circle or diamond is above 0, it means that more students in 2022 want to go on that area than 2018. In terms of the ICT profession, for most of the country, you see that more students want to go into the ICT-related profession among the students in 2022. But when you look at the health sector, in Finland, Denmark, Sweden, and Estonia, students' interest in the health sector decreased between 2018 and 2022. Less of the students are interested in going into the health sector. And then we found out that the student interest in the health sector decreased more in the system where higher absolute number of COVID-19 cases are observed. So students listen to the news and hear the news and learn from the situation, and they may have developed some more challenging image of health profession in many of the system, and that is now influencing on the student future occupational expectation. So this is the area also need to look into. Thank you. And then just closing. So this is just the start of the PISA 22 analysis. This year, we are planning to publish 3 additional reports. The first one is the creative thinking. So this is the innovative domain, the student creative thinking. Analysis will be released on 18th of June. And second report will come out on 27th of June, the same month, June. This is about the student financial literacy. And the last volume in this year will be on the student readiness for lifelong learning. We will focus on the student learning strategy, what kind of learning strategy students develop in and out of school, and what are the factors related to the development of learning strategy, which are essential for student lifelong learning, which will come out in November this year. Thank you very much.
And thank you so much for this excellent presentation, which give us a good basis for the discussions in the afternoon. We have some time for questions from the audience, and we have Sophia and Lovisa with microphones. Anyone who dare? I'm sure you have a lot of interesting questions in your head. It's not a problem if you want to ask them loud. Otherwise, I will just go ahead. Yes, please, gentlemen here. And please tell us who you are as well.
Yeah, my name is Nils Jakob Perlersplass. I work for the Ministry of Education and Research in Norway. And I have a question in regards to the general decline for all the OECD countries. When we see that the decline is overall in the same direction, so to say, do you have a more general idea or an explanation of how that came to be? And obviously when we see that the Nordic countries have perhaps a more steep decline, if you have any ideas about that as well. Thank you.
Do you want to take the 2 questions, or do you want other questions as well at the same time? Or
yeah, either's fine.
Yeah. Anyone who has a question? No, I'll let you answer this one then. And if you have some more, we'll have more time.
Thank you. So among the countries participating in both 2018 and 2022, some countries stayed the same performance, and then even that went up the performance over the 4 years despite the pandemic. So the pandemic is clearly affecting many of the system, but some of the system really recover or bounce back that challenge. So first is the pandemic and school closure, and the second is the digital destruction. We do not have any trends data that whether the digital destruction is increasing or not, but at least it's very clear that many of the systems are suffering or do not know how to deal with the digital destruction yet. This is really the hot topic, very urgent topic that many systems have to deal with. So that's the second part. And then teacher support decline. So that is really shown in many places. The support of teacher is declining over time. So that's the third point. And fourth point I didn't cover today is parents' involvement in education is declining, including the Nordic countries. We asked school principal that how many % of the parents are involved in the student learning matter from the initiative of the parents. And that went down quite a lot in many systems. And then in Nordic countries also. So parents may be busy after coming over the pandemic. We do not know what is behind, but this is the area that we really need to pay attention to. And PISA analysis show that those students who are performing high are often talking with parents, eating with parents. The parents are not necessarily checking their homework or not spending long time for learning, but it's more just showing attention and interest on student learning. So even like a brief time talking with the children and asking children about how was school, that may be the place to start. So that's the fourth part. And then the fifth point that we found that the school is not only just a learning place, but it's the social hub. The students enjoy being with our students, and then students are learning from other students. And the system where the peer-to-peer tutoring is higher, they tend to perform higher. So the school is not really just cognitive development, but the social relationship seems to be an important part that we need to pay attention. And in Finland, we saw that this peer-to-peer learning went down quite a lot over the last 4 years. And we saw that Iceland and peer-to-peer learning increased. So there might be some reason for each of the countries, but it's the area that look into that if there is enough platform that students are given so that students can talk with other students and learn from other students.
Thank you. Do you have more questions? Yes, please. Here's the microphone.
Thank you. Hi, Peter Eriksson at the Universitets- och högskolerådet, and we're lost for the English translation of that. There are two slides that I can't add up or that I can't get a grip on. And the first one was quite early when it was about how much effort they put into the PISA test. And the second one was that the students' opinion on how they could change raise their intelligence by making an effort. So I read that as we can't be bothered to with the test, but we know that if we put in an effort, we can change something. So I can't really, I can't add those two together.
So the first one is more about the test or schooling. That we ask a student that how much effort do you put in the school and also PISA, and then some high-stake test. But growth mindset, we ask more in general, just intelligence, so that there might be some separation between the intelligence development and schooling. So this is just a hypothesis, but this effort part is really just about the school. Or more narrowly, we ask about the test. And then the other one is the intelligence in general. So students may be thinking that intelligence, which need to survive in the world, may not be really something that they are learning in school. So that could be the one potential explanation. So they don't see the value of learning in school. On the other hand, students are ready to make effort for more to survive in the society.
Thank you. Anything else? I have a last question then, connecting to all these topics you've been talking about, different explanations for this decline, pandemic, and then you have digital distractions, supportive teachers, parent involvement, social hub. Apart from the pandemic, everything seems to gather around motivation, because without digital device, or when you have the digital device, maybe you're more motivated to be in your digital device than in the classroom. And with supportive teachers, you get motivated, and the same with parents. Have you seen, my first question is, do you see that? Is it the motivation part which is the most important to be able to learn? And is it specific societies where you see have bigger motivations than others?
Yes, so traditionally we ask the student about motivation, and we always see that now very positive correlation student motivation and the performance. And now we are developing the final volume on lifelong learning, and motivation is a really key indicator we are now analyzing. So that we ask the student about instrumental motivation, so the learning in school, does it help for getting a better job? Or intrinsic motivation, that learning itself, do you enjoy learning mathematics? So we look into both, but in general, all research, including the PISA, have shown that the motivation is really a key for the performance. And then now we are looking into that, how this motivation has changed over time, including PISA 2022, and we will publish that in November.
Thank you very much. That's a good cue to end this session. Thank you so much, and a warm applause to Miyako Ikeda. Thank you.